I see three plausible scenarios for the Russian future. 1. North Korea. 2. Imperial reboot. 3. Jubilee. Since Ukraine is resolved to fight, the choice of a Russian historical track ultimately depends upon the resolve of the West. Today I'll outline the North Korea scenario. Thread. If the West de-escalates and Putin stays in power, he will become much stronger and Russia will become more like North Korea. You shouldn't delude yourself. There's no way back to February 23rd. As a result of de-escalation, Russia won't return to the status quo. If the West de-escalates, it means Putin was absolutely 100% right to rush Z, and all who doubted him were idiots. When Putin decided to fight, officials such as Foreign Intelligence Service Chief Naryshkin hesitated. They doubted his decision. Victory will dispel any doubts. Many compare Putin's Russia with the USSR and Z war with the Cold War. That's wrong. With the brief exception of 1945 to 1953, the USSR was always collectively run. Politburo actually discussed policy decisions. The USSR was much more oligarchical and modern Russia is more autocratic. With the exception of late Stalinism, the USSR was a party oligarchy. Ruling clique made collective decisions and Politburo protocols showed they were actually discussing them. Politburo had real debates. Modern Russia has no debates, only the supreme leader dictating his will.
Нашим, так сказать, западным партнерам можно дать последний шанс с тем, чтобы предложить им в кратчайшие сроки заставить Киев пойти на мир и выполнить Минские соглашения. В противном случае мы должны принять то решение, о котором сегодня говорится.
Что значит, в противном случае вы предлагаете начать переговорный процесс?
Нет, я...
Или признавать суверенитет их?
А я
говорите прямо.
Я поддержу предложение о признании...
Поддержу или поддерживаю? Говорите прямо, Сергей.
Поддерживаю предложение...
Так и скажите, да или нет.
Да. Поддерживаю предложение о вхождении Донецкой и Луганской народных республик в состав Российской Федерации.
Да, мы об этом не говорим, мы этого не обсуждаем. Мы говорим о признании их независимости или нет.
Да, я поддерживаю предложение о признании независимости.
Хорошо, пожалуйста, садитесь. Спасибо. Владимир Александрович.
De-escalation proponents ignore its effect on the balance of power within Russia. Putin already concentrated enormous decision-maker power in his hands, much more than Soviet rulers. Not everyone, however, trusts his judgment 100%. Victory will show you must follow Putin blindly. Consider Munich Agreement, 1938. When Hitler manufactured crisis in Czechoslovakia, many in Germany doubted his judgment. Wehrmacht and Abwehr officers led by Hans Oster planned a coup aiming to assassinate Hitler and to overthrow the Nazi rule that leads Germany to catastrophe. Why didn't they do it then? Well, because the West de-escalated. Neville Chamberlain chose appeasement strategy. He was afraid of the war and thus gave Hitler concessions to buy peace. However, these concessions very much increased Hitler's authority within Germany. German resolve in World War II should be viewed in the context of Munich. In 1938, Hitler put Germany on stake. Many doubted his judgment. Some plotted to kill the madman. But then the West backed off and gave concessions. He isn't a madman. He is a genius. Those who doubted him are mad. Foreign policy impacts domestic policy. It's insane to ponder how this or that pact will change international balance of power without considering its effect on domestic balance. Every risky move he gets away with increases the power of a ruler. We doubted him, but he was right. I noticed an interesting pattern. Those analysts who casually label dictatorial behavior as irrational never manage to establish a proper dictatorship. They don't know how to build dictatorial power. They don't know how to keep it. They have no idea what they're talking about. Dictator must make risky irrational moves to shift domestic balance of power. When he puts the country on stake, many doubt his judgment. But once he wins, he's proven right. His genius. Following him blindly is the smartest thing you can do. That's how he builds his power. Russian people may not have realized this yet, but officials know that Putin has put Russia at stake. More importantly, he put them, their lives, fortunes and careers on stake. They're very nervous. Many wish they could return to February 23 and undo all the following decisions. Russia can't make peace with Ukraine because it would mean Ukraine has won. Once Putin declared them as Nazis and promised to destroy them, he can't back off. That would mean he tried to finish them and failed. His judgment is weak. That will break his stand within Russian power.
Любой договор, который подпишет Россия с властью, которая сегодня в Киев, будет означать поражение России в этой операции. Полное и окончательное. В глазах народа России, в глазах армии России, в глазах всего мира. И тогда поддержка, о которой ты говорил, и Индии, и Китая,
Уйдет.
и арабского мира испарится. Сейчас на повестке дня стоит, когда началось противостояние между Соединенными Штатами и Россией и НАТО. Я сказал, Россия предъявила ультиматум и себе тоже. Россия не имеет права проиграть эту операцию в Украине. Не имеет права. Это будет означать, что у России нет сил справиться с кем? С Украиной? С Зеленским? И пошли на договор. Хасавюрт по сравнению с ним, это еще будет большое дипломатическое достижение. Потому что Хасавюрт не был началом конца государства России. Он был одним. А этот договор может быть началом конца России как государства. Потому что если не удается навести порядок на Украине, что вы замахиваетесь на НАТО? Чего вы замахиваетесь на Соединенные Штаты? Вы с Зеленским не могли справиться, так чего вы? То есть тут у вас на повестке дня стоит один вопрос. Или вы победите в этой операции, или начинаете обратный отсчет.
However, any agreement between Russia and the West, any de-escalation, lifting of any sanctions will have the opposite effect. Russian authorities don't think they're fighting with Ukraine, they think they're fighting with the West. Putin escalated conflict and the West backed off. Consider Zhirinovsky's speech in Parliament on January 18, 2022. It may not reflect the united position of Russian power, but it certainly reflects its worldview. We must wage a war too. A featuring West be using our military superiority C and thus solve our economic problems.
Исторический момент, когда мы должны выиграть у Запада и окончательно выиграть. Тогда мы должны использовать наше преимущество в военно-технической области. Без этого нам не добиться успеха. Сейчас мы можем это сделать. Сейчас великий шанс. Это не танковые армии и даже уже не ракеты, а то оружие, которое есть только у нас пока. Поэтому надо покончить с тем, чтобы нам кто-то мог угрожать. Поэтому шутить не надо. Сегодня самый исторический момент, понимаете? Поэтому если этот шанс не будет упущен, то мы станем действительно мощным государством. Это слово «великое» уже измордовали, все великие. Окончательно решить проблему враждебного окружения и оскорблений и угроз со стороны Запада. То есть мы должны выиграть. Вот если слова какой-то песни, там это наш последний и решительный бой. Вот это наш последний решительный бой, весна 22 года. Пусть это будет в апреле, в мае, но в этом году это можно сделать. Мы победим, только тогда решим все экономические проблемы. Тогда все деньги сдадут сюда, все деньги вернем с офшоров. И наши олигархи. Денег немерено будет. И на оборону больше не будет столько денег. За победу России в новой войне!
This speech reflects assumptions Russian rulers are basing their policy on. First, Zhirinovsky mentions Russia has economic problems. It's a slip of the tongue and an understatement. In fact, Russia is in a deep structural crisis. It's the oil exporter that ran out of cheap oil. Theoretically, Russia has huge oil and gas deposits, but nearly all of them lie in the Arctic and are super expensive to develop. Moreover, Russia lacks technology to develop them alone and has to rely on Western investors and suppliers. Russia is also dependent upon technological import. Russia doesn't produce much, and what it does produce, it produces on Western machines, with Western components and technologies. This can't be solved within the current socio-political order. Finally, Russia is depopulating. It has fewer youngsters and fewer Russians. That's what believers in Russian resilience forget. Yes, in the past Russia could afford huge human losses to win wars and industrialize. But back then it was young. These are economic problems Sharanovsky was talking about and which nearly everyone in the Russian ruling class was aware of. You shouldn't underestimate Russian officials. They may not be geniuses. Most of them are not even intellectuals. But most of them are not dumb. Now imagine yourself as Putin or those in power who support him. You know your country is in deep crisis. It's depopulating. It doesn't produce much and is critically dependent on import. It mostly exports oil and gas and now runs out of cheap oil gas. The rest is in the Arctic. Russian leadership more or less knew how badly Russia is doing in industrial production, in natural resources extraction, in demography. They knew the ship is sinking, but they couldn't know how bad is situation in Russian army. Why? Because no expert could know that. The awful situation in Russian economy was a common knowledge. Many knew, including those working for the Kremlin. Consider Deputy PM Belousov, who briefly worked as an acting prime minister. He is an economist who made very grim assessments of Russian economy and demography. Those in power could have quite accurate and reliable data on situation in Russian economy. Because such data is common knowledge, everyone could easily get verifiable info on it, and many of those who did, made it into the power. Ministry for Economic Affairs is very meritocratic, very open, and is actively headhunting. They tried to invite me for a job interview 5 times in 2021, equals evidence of their high reasoning abilities. They're targeting people with Western education, tech companies background, etc. Putin has employees who accurately understood the economic situation and he read their briefs. We have every reason to believe that Putin and those around him had access to the reliable data on Russian economy and demography. He knew ship is sinking, so you have to do something. But nobody could provide Putin with accurate, reliable data on the capacities of the Russian army, because such data didn't exist in the first place. Russian army has not been tested in battle against big regular armies since 1945. Ukraine 2022 is the first experiment since World War II. Since World War II, Russian army has been involved only in police operations against civilians in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, or guerrillas like in Chechnya and Syria. But Russia has no experience of fighting regular armies. 2022 is an experiment. Putin had reliable data on economy. He couldn't have such data on army performance in a real war cause such data didn't exist. He relied on opinions of generals and experts who believed in easy victory. In this respect, Russian experts were not much better than the Western ones. When I say Putin couldn't have reliable data, I mean reliable aggregated data. Of course he could talk with regular soldiers, get some anecdotal data and extrapolate it. That would be much better than listening to experts. Consider interview of Wagner mercenary who fought in Syria.
Вообще вооруженные силы, несмотря на то, что как они себя там разрекламировали в результате вот этого освободительного похода в Сирию, да, они же реального боевого опыта там не получают. Они не участвуют в боях. То есть они получают опыт пребывания на территории, на которой вот идет война. Вот этот опыт. Ну, это же сомнительный опыт, он как бы он непосредственно не имеет отношения к понятию боевой опыт. Реального боевого опыта они там не получают. И причем я возьму на себя смелость, вот, по-моему, все. Ну, за исключением там летчиков, ПВО, ну, у них своя специфика, своя направленность, вот, они там какую-то практику получают. А вот все представители сухопутных войск там не получают качественного боевого опыта. Даже, могу, извините за такую смелость высказывания, даже ССО, она не получает боевого опыта. Все это опыт какой-то, он некачественный. Абсолютно как бы такой вот, который не предполагает возможную готовность армии к какой-то более большой войне. Это у нас уже из поколения в поколение оно передается несколько пренебрежительное отношение к вероятному противнику. Там Помнили Дебальцево? Вот как Дебальцево, как мы там свернули. Они забыли о том, что это было в 2015 году, а сейчас уже 22 год. И там и армия украинская уже не там. Вот. И обстоятельства уже не те. Так что я бы очень сильно поостерегся заявлять о том на их месте, что мы прямо пройдем там победным маршем. По-моему, что-то вы заблуждаетесь немного. Победный марш не получится. А те вот эти вот, которые заявляют, ну им же не в окопы не лезть, им же не рисковать собой. Потому они вот так вот бахвальствуют.
Putin didn't collect and extrapolate the accurate anecdotal data from the frontline soldiers. Instead, he relied on inaccurate aggregated data provided by generals and experts who are just wrong like most experts around the world. And B. Do not ignore experience of frontline workers. This asymmetry in data accuracy explains Putin's decision to rush Z. He knew how badly is Russian economy doing, but he believed in might of the Russian army, so he thought that being in an economic decline, Russia still has military leverage which would be silly not to employ. I want to clarify, it wasn't Putin's personal delusion, it was a Russian mass delusion. They greatly overestimated Russian military capacities. Compare the tone of Putin's chief propagandist Soloveyov in late February and in late March.
Сейчас бровь поднимем, и Украина поймет все. И не надо никаких иллюзий. Возьмем Киев. Ни о каком быстром решении и речи не идет, потому что противостоит армия вторая в Европе после нашей, которую 8 лет готовили.
Before the invasion, Russian nationalists saw military might as a leverage and openly discussed that. Let me quote the following article by Sputnik and Pogrom, the major nationalist media. Read it. It's very telling. It's the ideology of aggressive policy based on mercenary army. Russians know and love doing two things, the war and the literature. Whatever we do that doesn't involve either war or literature almost always turns out badly. Many Russian institutions are heavily militarized for this very reason. We have a destitute people which doesn't incline to idealism. Russians love money very much and will kill anyone for money. We saw this in 1990s. It's a boring northern country. You can cheer yourself up only with a beautiful life, abundance, prosperity, plan of any military campaign. Soldiers get condo plus Higgley junior officers, large condo plus foreign car for $20,000 senior officers, townhouse plus foreign car for $40,000 generals, a cottage plus foreign car for $80,000 minister of defense, estate plus foreign car for $80,000. That's it. We don't need anything else. What Ukraine? What North Kazakhstan? Start using South Ural instead. Audi A4 and new condo are at stake. These guys will conquer even Australia. Where do we get the money from? Oil, gas, trophies. We don't even need patriotic propaganda. Why are you occupying Constantinople? You can't respond. I want to eat black caviar and ride on Cadillac with top models. So we will talk of the crossover Hagia Sophia, orthodoxy. That's good enough. Any justification is good enough, including even the Fifth International. They criticize Russians for lack of idealism. Russians will sell their motherland for cash. I actually agree. But it also means that Russians would do whatever with others' motherland for money. They'll swim in gold like Scrooge McDuck and get status of honorable warriors. That's a very telling publication. Western midwits make up BS justifications for the invasion and invent idealistic motivation for the invaders. But according to Russian ethno-nationalists, it's just a mercenary army that will kill whomever for money. When we talk of Russian ruling class, we are talking about not dumb, highly pragmatic and highly opportunistic guys. Most of them are already doubting Putin's judgment. They may not tell it or tell it in a very politically correct way, but they're in doubt. He put them on stake. However, if Putin wins, and de-escalation with the West means his victory, it will greatly shift the balance of power within Russia in his favor. Yes, Russia as a whole will be weaker, but Putin himself much stronger. His mythos and Russian imperial mythos will grow stronger. What changes should one expect in Russian society? If Putin wins, first, ruling class will not be able to doubt or question his authority. Within Russian imperial mythos, victory is all redeeming, and the inability of the West to crush Putin means his victory. It will retrospectively legitimize all the Putins record. Soviets did this trick in late 1960s. Dekulakization. Industrializations, purges were necessary to win the World War II. Victory is all redeeming, and Putin's victory against the West will retrospectively redeem everything. 2. Much of Russia believes in Putin. Their faith will grow much stronger. Many don't believe in him. They'll either get ashamed of their previous views, repent and become stronger and more unquestioning believers, or will just shut up and live in silence. Russia has already changed. Major oppositional media were either closed or low-key stopped working. Any institutions who tried to question Putin are being quickly dismantled. This encroachment will only increase after his victory. No independent speech will exist in New Russia. Russia will become much poorer, but its rulers might even like that. Consider this paper by now Deputy PM Belousov. The growth of middle class is problematic. They buy expensive imported goods. They increase cost of labor, demand more labor rights. They try to emigrate. Russian elite doesn't want Russians to be rich. They view poverty as a competitive advantage. If they're poor, we can keep wages low, decreasing cost of production. If they are poor, they can't buy expensive foreign goods, worsening our trade balance. Finally, poor won't emigrate. Demise of private sector is a problem only in short perspective. In a long term, it's a win-win situation. Private sector destroyed, the emigration routes closed, people will have no choice but to work for those high in dominance hierarchy for food. That's a competitive advantage. Another advantage of poverty is that you can easier find recruits for your imperial wars. Many are surprised by Russian parents refusing to help their kids who are captured in Ukraine. But if you think of it, it makes total sense. These families view their kids as a resource. Parents all around the world sell their kids to prostitution, and it surprises no one. These families view their children as an economic resource which must earn money for them, this way or another. That's exactly how much of the Russian poor view their children. Why soldiers' families aren't protesting? Well, they are lavishly compensated. You can now get 170,000 salary for enlisting into army. That's huge money for province with 20,000 salaries. Putin also pays over 7 million rubles to families of soldiers killed in Ukraine. A good deal. The only case of families protesting against the war in Ukraine I could find happened in ethnic province, Karachivo-Cherkassia. 6 women from 29 to 61 years old blocked the road demanding to disclose fate of their kin sent to Ukraine. They were arrested, of course. Russian provincial families are losing their sons in Ukraine, but they won't protest. Their son died as a hero, plus they get a payout. Great deal. Moreover, since their son died for Russia, we must keep fighting till the victory. We don't want our boy to die in vain, do we? Cynical it may sound, death of a son in Ukraine is a good deal, because 1. He is an economic resource anyway. 2. War is a good way to cash out this resource. It's not that his death is a win. It's that once he's dead or captured, you just write off the lost resource. Consider that men in Russia don't live too long anyway, and the lives of men from poor towns and countryside are especially short. You can verify it walking through a small town in Novgorod or in Ivanovo. Yes, they die, but they wouldn't live too long anyway. Not much of a loss. I understand that this account may sound dark and even dehumanizing. It's not. Parents who sell their kids into prostitution are very, very human. It's just they have no honor. Modern culture tends to idealize and glorify poverty, while in fact there's little glory down there. As Chesterton wrote, the whole point of property is that in that alone can be naturally nourished the sentiment of honor, and vice versa. Where there is no property, no sentiment of honor can be nourished. It's a stable equilibrium. This order can last for centuries. End of thread.